Hello and welcome to Building Futures, career conversations with leading lights across the built environment. Today, I'm really looking forward to speaking to Maria Zedda, who is Senior Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Workforce and Communities for HS2. Hello, Maria.
Hello.
So lovely to be talking to you today. So you and I met last year at a ED&I event. And I was just struck by your passion and your energy for diversity and inclusion. But just for anyone who doesn't know your bio, can you just give a quick summary of what you do?
Sure. I am a Senior Diversity and Inclusion Manager at HS2. My remit are specifically around the workforce and the communities along the road. So essentially my job is to make sure that if you look at the employee journey in any employer, with any employer, that they feel a sense of inclusion and belonging at all times.
And this is what I've really sensed from you every time we have met, is that you don't just do this because it's your job. You do it because it's your passion. And that really spoke to me, given the challenges that we have in the built environment. We're the ones that are going to fix how people travel from A to B, but also net carbon zero and all of the big society's civil engineering issues will be solved by us in the built environment. And yet our own workforce is often not diverse. So we have this challenge of a big skills shortage, and yet the only way we're going to deal with these big problems is to get the most diverse range of people wanting to come into the industry. So that's how we met. So how do you feel, what could we be doing differently to make more people feel that this is a career for me?
Okay. Well, I think that people essentially are very discerning. And as employers, we should never patronize anyone. Yeah. And we should really make ourselves accountable for how we make people feel. And essentially, there is quite a bit of choice in the job market. And job seekers are very discerning. And I think it's really important that we start from a place of, I want to have the best workforce at my disposal. I want to be able to have a great business, a strong business, and be able to anticipate risk. And what helps with that is surely the diversity of the workforce, but not just on a superficial level, but also at senior level as well. So that you have an even, consistent distribution of diversity, not just from the middle to the bottom, but across the entire workforce. And it's really imperative because really, particularly when you're looking at big infrastructure projects, it is really important that we anticipate risk, and diversity does just that.
So if someone was listening to this and is working for an organisation across the built environment and feels that their own organisation isn't as diverse as it could be, are there any practical tips that you could give that an organisation could take to help to make themselves be more inclusive and diverse? Absolutely.
One of the things that I recommend organizations do is to look at the recruitment websites, their own sort of careers page, so to speak, and really showcase people's stories. People love stories. So if you have examples of a variety of workforce, diversity workforce, represented in your stories, a day in the life of, stories like that with different representations, and not just stories that feel like tokenism,
Yeah.
but those that are really coming from the heart and people that feel proud of working there and tell that story. I think that's the number one attraction point.
Yeah.
Definitely, I would recommend that you have an accessible website.
Yeah.
That's really important, particularly because, you know, we have many disabled, neurodiverse job seekers that really rely on the accessibility of the website to begin with. And really, when you have a recruitment process that is counterintuitive and clumsy, and it takes too many steps, people tend to walk away from it. And most people, particularly talent, they're busy. They're busy. So, you know, the website, the recruitment process needs to work for them, not for the employer. So I think that's really key. And also, I would really recommend, if you don't know where to start, look at your own workforce and the diversity that you already have, and really try to engage with them and ask them, how can we do this better? Because most often than not, you already have your own this resource in-house already.
It's so clever what you were saying. And I do agree with you. And it's so insightful of you to recognise that at the moment we have a skills shortage. It's a skills shortage across all sectors, but it's acute in construction and property. We don't have enough people choosing it in early careers and choosing it to go to university or colleges. And so it needs to become the destination. And yet in order to do that, we need to make people make it easy. And you were saying then about the accessibility of websites, and it's something, again, people don't necessarily always think about, but also not just that, but how accessible are the actual interviews? You know, how easy would it be for example, a wheelchair user to get in and out of that building or even to travel to that event? And I think that it's about really thinking about every step you've got to make people feel welcome, I think.
Absolutely. I can tell you a little story of how I experienced being hired at HS2.
Right.
So as someone with a different, you know, I wear many diversity hats.
Yeah.
I am Italian originally, so as soon as I open my mouth, you can tell I have an accent. I am also severely deaf, so I need to have a certain amount of accessibility approaching interviews, for example, meetings or events. And also I have a different background, and I definitely never imagined that I would one day work in engineering and construction. Because also, unfortunately, we are paying the price of bias in education. Yes. Many people are survivors of education where people with a difference, people from ethnic minorities, women and disabled students particularly, they were often told, are you sure you can do this? Science is only going to get more difficult. And often we drop the subject because of lack of confidence, because of the bias that is still there in the education sector. So we're paying the price for that. And also because if you think about the challenges that there are in wider society for women, for disabled people, for people from a different ethnicity, yeah. You already have a lot of battles in society. So often you ask yourself, do I really need another battle going into this sector that is probably non-diverse to begin with? And you're already anticipating lots of battles, and you're kind of put off by it a little bit. So in engineering and construction, we have to go beyond that and really work at attracting people, because we already have so much bias against the industry to begin with.
Agreed.
And one of the things that worked for me actually was that when I heard about the role that was available in equality, diversity and inclusion at HS2, I applied, but I felt that I didn't have a chance because of my different background, and I'm too different and so on. I graduated, I got a bachelor's degree from a university in London, very reputable organization, but it's definitely not Oxbridge. So I was kind of feeling, well, nobody is going to be interested in me. What surprised me about how I was hired was that I sent my CV through and I fulfilled the minimum criteria. It's always a minimum criteria anyway. So at HS2, for example, they don't publish desirable criteria, which is very important. And so I heard from the recruiter and they said to me, your CV meets the requirement, but would you be interested in a challenge in solving a problem? And I said, okay, what is it? So I was sent a challenge. I had to solve a problem. It was a statistical analysis of ED&I. And I replied back and I sent it back. I had a day or two. And it was a problem solving that you can't really Google it. You really have to know this stuff because your solution needs to be very individual, personal. So they replied back after a few days and said, okay, you're going to now the next stage. How do you feel about another one? And I said, okay, send it over. They did. I replied, I also solved another problem. And basically they said to me, you're now shortlisted for an interview and nobody has even seen your CV yet. So I bypassed all of the potential bias that could have come my way purely because they were focusing on the skill set and the ability to solve the problem.
Amazing.
So that was what gave me a chance. And then eventually when I went to the interview, I had a great interview. They accommodated the fact that I needed to speak to people facing them. And basically it was quite funny because when I was offered the job, they said to me, Maria, we would like to offer you the role. It's not because we like you, but because you scored the highest. What they were trying to say was that the process had been impartial. At first, I was a bit taken aback because I was thinking, I want people to like me.
Please, can you also like me as well as me being the best at this?
Absolutely. But it was also really liberating. Because it felt like I got there on my own based on my skills. And I think if we could have this kind of approach, we could reach out so many more people from different backgrounds because we would be looking at their skills and not what their name sounds like, where they studied at university, and so on and so on. What part of town do they live? You know, all of that stuff. So I think that there's so many ways in which we can make our recruitment more inclusive.
But what I loved in that story, as you said, was it so much was skills-based, as opposed to, as you said, you know, which university did you go to? What did you study? Because the reality of it is, a lot of kids are having to make decisions when they're 16 and 17 about really the rest of their lives. And not everybody knows at that age what they want to do. And so I think when you make it about potential, about problem solving, and about really the way you would approach something, as opposed to, did I make the right decision at 18? I think that is just so liberating, and it's the way we need to be to make more people see that you can come into this industry. That is phenomenal. So if I was to give you a magic wand and say, right, you have the power of all the institutions have to listen to you, you know, government, to get more people to really feel included and want to work in our environment, across the built environment, what would you do?
Oh, I will do so much.
Yes.
But I will just really focus on making the journey simple. And I would really recommend that they approach experts in equality, diversity, and inclusion that hold their hand and guide them through the journey. Because often the journey in D&I can feel very daunting. It can feel like there's too much to do, too many problems to solve. But actually, if you put yourself in the hands of experts who know what they're doing and actually are qualified to do it. Because opening a quick bracket here, often you find people that are given these responsibilities in D&I that speak purely from a passion perspective, which is great, but sometimes they might not have the actual expertise. So it could be like leaders in staff networks and so on, which are so important, but at the same time, it's not the expertise, the proven expertise in equality, diversity, and inclusion. So really trust the experts. And actually, what you need to be doing is actually simpler than you think. Start looking at your data and engage with the recruiters who are doing this on behalf of your teams, and try to take small steps, small incremental steps, and measure. You could do simple things like making sure that every interview panel is diverse. That is just so easy to do. And when candidates show up and they see themselves represented in the interview panel, it just gives them an opportunity to present the best of themselves. Also, it can be about the little technical thing about accessibility, but also really monitor your data. It's very easy to look at your statistics and think, oh, we are diverse enough. But actually, looking in more depth about how diverse are you, the more senior you get, how diverse the population becomes. And that's what's really important to look at, because you want diversity in decision making. That's what's really important. It's particularly preventing risk.
Absolutely.
And one of the lessons are, I remember hearing about this speech from Mark Wild, who is the CEO of Crossrail. And he was referring to the hiccups that Crossrail encountered at some point, going over budget and over time. And essentially, he was saying, what we had was we were in a bit of a bubble, because it was just all of our senior, and we were all the same, similar background, similar everything, similar education, similar decision making. And we couldn't see what was in front of us. Nobody had the courage to speak truth to power. And so diversity is really essential at senior level, because it really helps you anticipate risk.
Totally agree. And it's also about creating a psychological safety in your organisation, that you feel not only can you observe what needs to be different, but that you're able to say, and I need to feel like, and that's what leaders can do. Leaders can create that environment where they make it very obvious they want to hear it, because sometimes it's not obvious, is it?
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you that, particularly every time I deliver training to senior leaders, for example, one of the reactions that I get is, oh my God, I thought we were in for a telling off. And actually, what you're suggesting is really doable. And see, this is where a professional, a real experienced equality, diversity, and inclusion professional can really make a difference. Because especially nowadays that we've witnessed a little bit of polarizing, especially in our culture, polarizing, pitting people against each other. Women against men, ethnicities versus white population, disabled people versus non-disabled people. And it's not about that. It really is about trusting the process, trusting the expert who tells you, who shows you, who fosters a safe space in which we can have a conversation. It's really important to make senior leaders feel that they can make a mistake within reason, but as long as they speak with respect, people can make mistakes all the time. And it's really important that we don't have polarizing of people, because that makes people feel like, oh, I'd rather not get it wrong, and therefore I'm not going to say anything. So, being in the hands of an expert and fostering safe spaces will enable that conversation, that learning. And it's so important, because otherwise, if you have diversity, but they don't feel the ability to speak up, then it doesn't matter.
100%. It's both, isn't it? It's making someone, getting people around you. It's interesting when you were talking then about Crossrail, because I recently watched on Netflix, there's a series about Challenger. And sadly, the really tragic events of Challenger, and they lost all the crew. And effectively, it's such an interesting, again, very similar, obviously very, very tragic, but that it was too much groupthink that everyone thought in the same way. And actually what they weren't able, exactly as you said, it was around risk. And in the end, something incredibly tragic happened. But it's all about organisations. It doesn't need to be that extreme. But like you said, it's when you think in a different way, because your lived experience is different, you could bring something. And actually, I think it's both, though. It's, as a leader, it's not just packing your team with diversity. It's then creating the space and saying, I'm okay with getting this wrong. And please correct me if please let me know because I don't want to, but I will make mistakes. We'll all do, because we're all human. So please let me know if there's something I'm doing which I'm inadvertently offending people, not making them feel inclusive, not making them feel like they belong, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think if you create that space, people will give best will. They'll know that you really want to try, and people will help you. I genuinely feel that. So just coming back to you, what career advice, you're in this fantastic role, you're really making a difference. What career advice would you almost give your 15-year-old, 16-year-old self? Like, what advice would you go? Or if you had, nieces, nephews, anyone in your life, what advice would you give about the world of work and being someone like you who's successful?
That would be good. I would definitely would love to say my younger self a few things that I've learned over the years. And that is to really believe the core of yourself and who you are, and trust that your core values, and follow and have integrity, and that will always see you through any situation that presents in front of you. And often, actually, sometimes when we have challenges, those can be opportunities. So not to lose heart, but actually try to see the opportunity in the challenges. I've definitely lived this through my own experience. Yeah. And at first, when you are impacted by something, for example, when I became a mom. I became a mom, I showed up at an interview, because the time it took for me to be invited, I was showing up. I had a bit of a surprise pregnancy. I was showing a little bit. And I remember meeting the person who was going to interview me. And this person looked at me, my figure, and said, what were you thinking? So I said to myself, okay, I am deaf. I am a mom. I'm a mom of a young baby and another one on the way. Yeah. You know what? I am going to set up my own company. I'm going to work around my family and my career, and I'm going to make it work. And I did. I ran that business for about 10 years, ended up, from nothing, ended up establishing a presence. We used to sell training and e-learning on diversity and disability inclusion. Yeah. And one of my most visible clients was the House of Commons, who ended up adopting my training for 12 years. Okay, So that made me feel like so proud.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been for that challenge of being looked at and that sense of shame coming over me, thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking, even applying for a job? And actually rebelling against
Yes.
that and feeling, no, I can do so much. I'm not going to let that stop me. And so going back to the younger self, I will say, so you trust your core values, you lead with integrity, and that will see you through.
Maria, thank you so much for today. I've actually felt the whole way through this that I wanted a notepad, and I'm looking forward to this coming out so I can literally sit and write notes, because what I've loved about it is you're so deeply practical and pragmatic. It's like, we can solve it, and these are the pragmatic ways in which we're going to do it. But actually, it's a really simple to follow, a practical guide to how can you make more people feel included, not just in an organisation, but in life. And I think that's so important. I also love how important values are to you. And I feel exactly the same way. And I think often when something doesn't feel right, it's because it isn't quite fitting with the core of who we are. And I think values really does lead what all of us are about. And it's about listening to that. And it's very clear to me you listen to that. But of course, what I love is the energy and the passion, and how you've always taken, when life has not necessarily gone your way, as like you said, as a challenge, to rise up and say, okay, I accept the challenge, adversity, let's go, and and where it's taken you. And I'm so pleased that you are at the heart of such an important project for the country at the moment. That is incredible. So thank you so much for coming and sharing part of your story. And thank you to you also for listening today. You can get other podcasts all about career conversations across the built environment by looking at the Hayes channel on YouTube and on Spotify.